Breaking news tonight, the Pope in America. A rousing welcome for the man who's been called the rock star Pope. Francis begins a historic visit.
I want to bring in Father Thomas Rosica. He's the English language media attaché for the Vatican. Father, thank you so much for joining me. You know this Pope very, very well as he steps foot on American soil for the first time. Only the fourth Pope to ever do this. What do you think is going through his mind?
I think there's great excitement. He's never been to the United States, so today's a first, many, many firsts. This grandiose reception that's being offered to him, all of America is represented here, large media corps, these kids screaming in the background. But what you see here is reflective of what's going on across the country, across the world, because a man of peace is in our midst today, a man of hope, somebody who's loved not only by the Catholic Church, but by people of goodwill around the world. And it's a great privilege to be here. This is really a moment of history that we're watching. And the American government putting on this royal welcome, both the president and vice president, members of the government, representatives of the Bishops' Conference, and of course, Cardinal Donald Wuerl, the Archbishop of Washington, who is the host of this part of the visit.
Some of the officials there you just mentioned, Cardinal Donald Wuerl of the Washington Archdiocese. There's also Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, who's president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, vice president of the same group, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, the Archbishop Emeritus of the Washington Archdiocese, and Archbishop Timothy Broglio of the Military Archdiocese.
And they're all here, and they're here to welcome the great pastor from Rome, their brother, the Pope, the Vicar of Christ, the Bishop of Rome, as he likes to call himself.
Father, as I don't need to tell you, the Pope's arriving today in a country where many say they no longer have faith. Some say that if lapsed Catholics or former Catholics were their own religious sect, they would be the second largest sect in the U.S. today, behind only Catholics who are observant. How does the Pope intend to use this visit to shepherd worshipers back to the flock, back into the church?
The Pope has one mission in this visit. It's to announce to us the gospel of joy. He wrote that wonderful apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, and he's here to talk about the joy of being Christian and the joy of being human. And that message transcends all races, all generations. It transcends all peoples. Why have so many people responded to this man? Extraordinary goodness. This morning I heard from many people, great authenticity, a revolution of normalcy. And the fact that he's entering the United States from Cuba is highly significant. The past few days in Cuba have been a huge dose and a jolt of hope for people who have lived very dark moments. And he raised those points with them. He brought them joy. He told the young people 2 nights ago, you have to dream. And if you don't dream, life becomes very difficult. And it's very, very significant that a man who helped to broker a new relationship with Cuba is here today, and he's coming from Cuba to bring some of the joy, the alegría from Cuba here to the United States. Many, many people are looking forward to his visit. People that are Christian, people with no religion at all. And I think it's very simple, because goodness and humanity recognize goodness and humanity. And that's what we're welcoming today in our midst.
I'd like to bring in, if I could, CNN religion commentator and Catholic priest, Father Edward Becca. Father, an honor to have you. Thanks for joining us. You were tearing up when His Holiness stepped off the plane. Tell us what this moment means to you personally.
Well, you know, Jake, I was thinking, here's a man who's never been to this country, and he's a simple man. As we've heard, he's probably more comfortable in the slums of Buenos Aires, in the favelas of Brazil, and yet here he is entering the corridors of power of our country. And as Delia mentioned, I think he's probably not all that comfortable with it. But I think what we're going to hear, and if I could use a scripture passage that I think would be the epitome of this visit, it would be, to whom a lot has been given, a lot is expected. I think that's the challenge he's going to give the United States. You are the richest country in the world, a country of opportunity, a country that can make a difference. Now, will you make that difference in the world? Will you give back what you've been given?
Father Beck, let me just interrupt you for 1 second. I just want to alert our viewers. We're seeing live pictures now of the Pope and the first family, President Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama, and obviously some uniformed Secret Service, or U.S. Secret Service, walking from the building. I think that President Obama will be escorting the Pope to his car, although given this Pope and his love of going to crowds, who knows what he's about to do right now. Father Beck, I'm sorry for interrupting. Please continue.
No, and I wanted to say, I don't think there's going to be any finger wagging. I think what we'll see is this Pope, especially when he speaks to Congress, will praise the liberty of the United States, the democracy, the opportunity, the plurality, all that we are as a nation. But then he will call us beyond that. Again, we've been given so much as a country. How can we help those who are in need? He'll speak, I think, to the refugee problem in the world. Can we, in fact, accept more refugees than we are? These issues that are very pertinent to our world right now, I don't think he will shy away from addressing them.
Our next guest says the leader of the Catholic Church is very much in tune with the political mood here in the U.S., where we see presidential candidates shaking things up and challenging the existing order. Jerry Seib writes in the Wall Street Journal, quote, Pope Francis is very much a man of his times, in sync with the dissatisfaction with the status quo that colors politics not just in the U.S., but across the Western world. He may be following the trend or he may be leading it, but one question about his week in the U.S. is whether he says or does things to accelerate it here. Jerry Seib is Washington Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal and joins us now. Is this a different message than previous popes have brought to the United States?
Oh, I think absolutely. It's a different message, not just to the United States, but it's a different message that the Pope has been sending to the church worldwide since he took over. And as you say, I think that the defining characteristic isn't really ideological. It is more a message that says the establishment has kind of lost its way. It's interested in rules and regulations and in perpetuating itself. And we need to change that. And his writings are sort of shot through and through with this thought that it's time to shake up the old order. Well, I mean, if that sounds a little like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, that's my point. You know, this is very much an era of challenging the status quo, and that's certainly what Pope Francis is about. Like Donald Trump, it's even more about that than it is about some particular spot on the ideological spectrum.
I remember one of Pope John Paul II's visits to the United States was supposedly about shaking up the American church and kind of trying to bring it back in line with Vatican theology. In this particular case, though, you write that you believe that Pope Francis is, as much as anything, trying to shake up the Vatican and the way the church overall is run.
Yeah, no, that's where it really started for him there, a message to the Vatican and by extension the church hierarchy in general, which is we should not be about laws and rules. We should be about being a giant parish is essentially the metaphor that he uses. And the church leaders should be like missionaries going out to the people, and particularly poor people, spreading the gospel and basically focusing on those who have not. And this was an attempt to move the church away from kind of the established pattern, which focused much more on dogma and much less on activities. And that's a big change, but it also meant changing the way the Vatican views the way it does its business. Again, if you draw the parallel to the U.S. political system, lots of candidates in both parties say essentially we need to come to Washington, to this place just behind me, and change the way things work within the power structure there.
Well, talking about politics, do any of the candidates, Republican or Democrat, do they try to piggyback onto the Pope's visit? Do they try to harness some of that energy and affection for the Pope to juice their own political campaigns?
It's a good question. I think that's a dangerous thing to do because people may see it as essentially phony or artificial and inappropriate. It is true, though, the White House is going to try to make sure that people focus on a couple of parts of the Pope's message that the administration likes, obviously climate change and income inequality. But again, the Pope is kind of an equal opportunity pleaser and offender. He'll say things that people on the progressive side of the agenda don't like. I think he's much more with the conservatives in the church on issues such as pro-life issues and even gay marriage than I think is popularly imagined. So you don't want to take too much for granted here. I think that trying to use the Pope as a political tool or symbol is a dangerous proposition for anybody, no matter where they come from.
You noted that there's a Gallup survey out from the summer that showed American confidence in religion or institutions of faith is down about 15% from a few years ago. The same can be said of the government too, though.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's worse for the government, obviously, than it is for the church. The church has actually held up reasonably well over the last 2 decades, which is the period of time that I looked at. Other institutions, starting with Congress, again, just behind me, much worse. But I think we live in an era of skepticism about institutions, large institutions in general. The church has not escaped that. I think one of the things that the Pope wants to do is to reestablish a kind of confidence that the church knows where it's going and that's going in a direction that people, both who are Catholics and who are non-Catholics, can appreciate, but that's a slow process. But in dealing with the institutional problems in terms of confidence and support, it's similar to what political institutions have.
It will be fascinating to watch. A controversy looms over his plan to canonize a missionary. Claudia Cowan live in Carmel, California with more on that. Claudia.
Hi, John. Well, back in the 1700s, a Father Junipero Serra introduced Christianity to California, founded many of the state's missions, like the Carmel mission here, where he's buried, and will soon become Saint Junipero. But some Native Americans are blasting the Pope's decision to canonize this controversial friar.
No sainthood for Junipero Serra.
At protests this summer, descendants of Native Californians compared the Franciscan priest to Hitler, saying that in establishing the missions during Spain's colonization in the 18th century, Serra imprisoned their ancestors and destroyed their culture.
Father Serra was a monster that created genocide on the California Indian people, and we are still recovering from that.
History shows that Serra, who's immortalized in stone throughout the missions and at the U.S. Capitol, baptized scores of Indians, made them live and labor at the missions, and punished those who tried to flee. But Sacramento pastor Ken Lavaroni, who's advocated Serra's sainthood for years, argues those were the actions of a stern and spiritual father, spreading the gospel during a turbulent period in California's history.
The suffering and the destruction of culture was not Junipero Serra. That was colonization.
Lavaroni says he hopes the Pope's action will generate a deeper awareness of Serra.
Pope Francis felt that Blessed Junipero Serra is an important role model for evangelization, and the church is in the midst of a new evangelization campaign to bring the gospel to all peoples.
These Native Californians don't care.
They're going to glorify this person for what he did to our people? I mean, common sense. You don't have to be an Einstein to know that this is not right.
And critics plan to hold more rallies tomorrow to coincide with the Pope's canonization of Father Serra in Washington, D.C. John.
Claudia Cowan. Claudia, thank you.
Have there been any specific threats against the Pope?
Well, Wolf, the Secret Service has taken all the necessary steps that they believe will be required to ensure that the Pope can do a couple of things. First is travel safely in the United States. This Pope also, as part of his trademark, is making sure that he can have the opportunity to spend some time with the people who live in the country that he's visiting. And he has this innate desire to try to make a connection with the population. And so we certainly have been working hard to try to accommodate his desire to make that kind of connection, even in a very physical way, while also making sure that all the necessary precautions are taken to keep him safe.
Why does the Pope require this huge level of security? It's at least equal, if not exceeding, the security that the president receives.
Well, Pope the Pope is an international symbol, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that he can participate in all the wide range of activities that he has planned for his visit here in Washington, D.C., and also give the American public the opportunity to hear his message and to really give him the opportunity to feel the warm welcome that we expect that he'll receive during his visit here to the United States.
I'm sure it will be very warm. As you know, the president, for the arrival ceremony tomorrow at the White House, invited thousands of people, about 15,000, but some are seen as controversial. You heard that report earlier, an openly gay Episcopal bishop, a transgender activist, or a few of them, a nun who heads up a social justice organization that's at odds with the Vatican over several issues, including abortion. So why did the president decide to invite these specific guests?
Well, Wolf, I think in general what you can expect are thousands of people representing a variety of communities all across the country who are eager to welcome the Pope not just to the United States but to the White House. There's no theological test administered to people who before they got tickets. Our goal here is to invite people who are just as inspired by the Pope and his message that the president himself is. And I think this will be an opportunity for the Pope to receive that warm welcome from a genuine cross-section of the American people, both Catholics and non-Catholics alike, who've been inspired by his message of social justice and caring for the least of these.
Pope Francis has arrived in the U.S. The pontiff was greeted by President Obama at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland about 2 hours ago. The two will meet again tomorrow at the White House. That's where correspondent Kevin Cork is tonight. We have heard a lot about the issues where the president and the Pope see eye to eye, but there are other issues where this White House and the Vatican are on completely opposite sides.
It was a reception fit for a pope, as the leader of the free world welcomed to the United States for the very first time the leader of the world's 1.1 billion Catholics. The president joined by First Lady Michelle, the vice president, and his wife Jill in welcoming the pontiff. The visit comes following the Holy Father's historic trip to Cuba, with whom he helped the United States reestablish diplomatic relations, a source of great pride for both the Vatican and the White House.
This is an opportunity for two men who have so many values in common to talk about the efforts that they are taking in their respective and quite different roles to advance those shared values.
But for all they hope to celebrate, this trip also comes against a backdrop of strong disagreement between the Vatican and the White House, particularly the Obama administration's positions on abortion, same-sex marriage, stem cell research, and contraception, the latter of which was the subject of a bitter dispute over religious freedom concerning the Department of Health and Human Services contraception mandate, including some provisions for abortions. That is part of Obamacare. That's a fight now engulfing Capitol Hill as GOP lawmakers have renewed a threat to defund Planned Parenthood, which not only receives $500 million annually in government funding, it's also a major dispensary of contraceptive services.
I don't know if he'll step into that or not, but he's the ultimate protector of life in the world, and it would be, I think, important for him to make some broad statements about the sanctity of life. That's what the Catholic Church is all about.
Dozens of plaintiffs filed suit against the administration because of the contraception mandate, including Catholic University, where the Pope will celebrate Mass on Wednesday. And then there's the issue of just who will attend the welcoming ceremony. The White House, it has been rumored, has invited an openly gay Episcopal priest and transgendered activists, something that didn't sit well with the Vatican.
Well, I think they should have some issues. It's kind of rude and insensitive to try to use the Pope as a political football for what is a very extreme end of the progressive agenda.
White House officials say with 15,000 people over on the South Lawn, there's really no way to tell exactly who will be in the crowd, but we should focus on the president's message, which should mirror some areas of agreement with the Holy Father, including combating poverty and fighting climate change.
It was one of the biggest symbolic moments of the Obama presidency. With the president and first family, plus the nation's first Catholic vice president and Dr. Jill Biden, all together greeting Pope Francis, it made for an unprecedented welcome to the U.S.
It is a big deal, and I think it's because, since it is the Pope's first time in the United States, what better way to welcome him than to greet him as soon as he touches the ground here in the United States.
Day 2 of the Pope's visit will be a sight to behold. For starters, 15,000 visitors are expected to cram onto the White House South Lawn to witness the Pope's official arrival. After the president greets the Pope, the two leaders will speak to the world, then hold a one-on-one meeting with only translators in the room, all before Pope Francis addresses Congress Thursday with Biden in attendance. Even though the president and the Pope are allies on issues ranging from climate change to income inequality to Cuba, even the Iran nuclear deal, the White House refuses to reveal what the two men will discuss.
The president will not arrive at that meeting with a political agenda.
Perhaps that's because this Pope can be full of surprises. After their last meeting, we asked the president whether any hot-button social issues were raised.
Did he register any objections with you about the contraception coverage mandate in the Affordable Care Act or your efforts to advance the rights of gays and lesbians in the United States that worry so many Catholics?
Mr. Obama responded. The Pope unexpectedly brought up immigration reform.
I think he was very mindful of the plight of so many immigrants who are wonderful people working hard, making contributions. Many of their children are U.S. citizens, and yet they still live in the shadows.
White House senior advisor Valerie Jarrett told CNN these two leaders may have more business to tackle in the president's final months in office.
The work is never done, but with two men of this caliber who share ideals and who share values about human decency, respect for human differences, I think that it's going to be a really, really positive visit.
Good evening from the campus of Catholic University of America. Behind me, the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, where Pope Francis will celebrate Mass tomorrow. The Pope's historic first ever journey to America began late this afternoon. Welcomed to Washington plainside by President Obama and a cheering crowd following his 3-day trip to Cuba. For American Catholics, the next 6 days offer a chance to see and touch a leader who is inspired with his humbleness, compassion, and mercy. But his outspokenness on matters of world affairs ensures his visit will also be seen through a political lens. We begin our coverage with NBC News national correspondent Peter Alexander. Quite a welcome today, Peter.
Lester, that's exactly right. This really is a historic trip. Pope Francis is now in for the night, but his arrival has already energized so many Americans, including more than 70 million American Catholics. His Holiness today made history, touching down outside Washington, Francis's first visit to the U.S. The Pope, welcomed by President Obama and the First Lady at Joint Base Andrews, a gesture so rare this president's only done it once before. The Holy Father also showing special affection for school children. He then left Andrews in an Italian-made Fiat, dwarfed by the American SUVs carrying his Secret Service detail. Earlier, en route from Cuba, aboard a jet dubbed Shepherd 1, Francis told reporters that he would not bring up the issue of the U.S. embargo on Cuba, saying this is a pastoral trip, not a political one. In Cuba, a remarkable reception, with the Pope calling for a revolution of tenderness. Today, thousands lined the street to greet Francis as he made a surprise trip in the Pope-mobile to meet with families at the Cathedral de Santiago, embracing and taking photos with some of his youngest hosts. Even President Raul Castro seemed impressed, meeting privately with Francis today for a third time. The 78-year-old pontiff carrying his own briefcase as he boarded the flight to the U.S. Awaiting him in Washington, a city known for tight security, police everywhere, closing streets, putting up barricades, and everywhere excitement.
There it is, going by, and there's the Pope.
We're really focusing on the message of love and mercy and the joy that he brings to all of us here.
Francis will visit with the president at the White House tomorrow, on Thursday becoming the first pope to address a joint meeting of Congress. Speaker Boehner today tweeting the view Francis will see while visiting the Capitol. While here, Francis will also parade along the National Mall and celebrate Mass at the largest Catholic church in the U.S. Tonight, Francis arrived at what's effectively the Vatican's embassy, located directly across the street from the Vice President's mansion. A humble man of faith, now at the center of American democracy.
And in a city that's not known for its spirituality or reflection, what's really struck me is just how much Washington has embraced this historic visit. The Cardinal here told us that he received a call from a friend saying, please take care of our Pope. And Lester, that caller wasn't even Catholic.
Lots of excitement. We've been watching him all day preparing for the Mass here at the Basilica tomorrow. Yeah. Peter, thanks very much. Our own Ann Thompson was on the plane with the Pope on his way to the U.S. And during the flight, he took some questions about the message he hopes to deliver during this historic visit. Ann joins us live from Joint Base Andrews. Ann, what did he say?
Well, Lester, I can tell you it was a very energized Pope Francis who came back to talk to reporters after 3 long, hot days in Cuba, telling us a funny story about a woman who thinks he's the anti-Pope because he doesn't wear the traditional red shoes. The Pope knows on this trip that he has the world's attention, and we expect him to use it to hit some favorite Francis themes. First of all, climate change. The Pope believes that developed countries like the United States owe an ecological debt to developing countries for all the carbon emissions they've spewed into the air. Immigration. The Pope asked every parish in Europe to adopt a refugee family to ease the crisis there. Might he do the same here in America? The plight of the poor. The Pope is going to have lunch with the homeless here in D.C. and the importance of family. That's going to be the topic when the Pope travels to Philadelphia over the weekend. The Pope told me on the plane that he is anxious to meet the American people. He gets his first chance when he takes the Pope Mobile around the Ellipse tomorrow. Lester?
Ann Thompson tonight, thank you.